further statements on another day. Questions without notice. The member for Griffith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister guarantee that the private member's bill on marriage equality that the member for Leichhardt and I co-sponsored will come before the House for a vote this year?
The Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm very happy to inform the member that this private member's bill will be treated in the same way that all private members' bills are treated in this chamber. That's the way it should be. There will be no special treatment, no favouritism, just exactly the same treatment that private members' bills are always accorded in this chamber.
I call the member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Speaker, and I want to add my congratulations to your elevation to the chair. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister update the House on the response to the government's plan to reduce Australia's carbon emissions, and how will this plan help the environment while protecting jobs and growth?
I call the Prime Minister. Those on my left will not interject.
I can assure.
If members will stop interjecting, the Prime Minister can answer the question he's been asked.
Mr Speaker, I can assure the House that, as far as the government is concerned, climate change is real. Mankind makes a contribution, and it's important to have strong and effective action to deal with it. And, Mr Speaker, this government has a very strong record when it comes to reducing emissions. We have met and beaten our Kyoto targets. We are on track to more than meet our current commitments to reduce our emissions by 13% on 2005 levels. We are on track to meet and beat our current commitments to reduce emissions by 2020 by 13% on 2005 levels. And, Mr Speaker, yesterday we announced our targets for 2030 to take to the Paris conference at the end of the year. We will reduce our emissions by 26 to 28%. This is a very strong and responsible target. It's environmentally responsible. It's economically responsible. It's better than Japan, it's much better than Korea, and it's vastly better than China. It's better than Japan's 25%, it's much better than Korea's 4%, and of course it's vastly better than China, which will actually increase its emissions by 150% by 2030. Yes, Mr Speaker, it's a whisker below Canada and New Zealand. It's a little below the European level, but unlike Europe, this country is growing strongly, both economically and in terms of population. And, Mr Speaker, we will reduce our emissions per person by 50%, at least by 2030, and this is the best outcome of any country that has so far said what its targets will be for the end of the year. So the costs are not insignificant, but they are manageable. Unlike members opposite, who want to clobber our economy with a $200 a tonne carbon tax and who want an $85 billion overbill.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat on a point of order. Point of order.
Relevant, Mr Speaker. The question was about his dog of a policy, not any other policy.
The member for Charlton is using offensive language. He'll withdraw that immediately. He'll withdraw it in an unqualified way. He will withdraw in an unqualified way.
I withdraw unqualified.
As I said yesterday, I call the Prime Minister. I call the Prime Minister.
So, Madam Speaker, Mr Speaker,
Yeah, the manager of opposition business.
The member for Deakin should withdraw.
I didn't hear what the member for Deakin said. The member for Deakin, if you made an offensive remark, could you withdraw, please?
I withdraw.
Thank you. I've taken a point of order. No, look, I ruled on this yesterday. I'll make a statement at the end of the Prime Minister's answer. The Prime Minister.
It was a silly point.
So, Mr Speaker, the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry said Australia's position for global climate talks later this year is a reasonable one that balances the need for action to contain emissions with the need to minimise damage to jobs and economic growth. And the Minerals Council of Australia said the national emissions target is an ambitious goal. It is, Mr Speaker, and we will achieve it.
Okay. I call the Leader of the Opposition.
My question's to the Prime Minister. How can the Prime Minister claim to lead the party of the individual when he will not allow individual members of his party to exercise a free vote on marriage equality?
I call the Prime Minister. Members on the government benches will cease interjecting. I call the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, as is well known, when I was asked about this prior to the election, I said that if this matter—
The member for Sydney will cease interjecting.
Mr Speaker, the government has exactly done what we said we would do before the election. Before the election, I said that if this matter was to come up in this parliament, it would be dealt with by the coalition party room in the usual way. I said before the election on a number of occasions that if this matter was to come up in this parliament, it would be dealt with by the coalition party room in the usual way. And I've got to say, Mr Speaker, that it was dealt with by the coalition party room in a very decent and respectful way over 6 hours yesterday.
Okay, the Prime Minister will resume his seat. The member for Grayndler.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister said at this dispatch box it was a matter for this parliament.
No, that's not a point of order. Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? I call the Prime Minister.
So, Mr Speaker, this matter was discussed by our party room in a very decent and respectful way for fully 6 hours yesterday. Some 90 members of the party room had their say, and by a very strong majority, essentially by 2 to 1, we decided to confirm our existing position, the position that we took to the election, that marriage was between a man and a woman for this term of parliament. Our strong disposition, Mr Speaker, is to go into the next election with a commitment to put this to the people. That's our disposition. Our strong disposition going into the next election is to put this to the people. So, Mr Speaker, going into the next election, there will be two parties with very different positions. Members opposite will want the politicians to decide. This government wants the people to decide. Over there, they want the politicians' choice. Over here, we want the people's choice, and what could be fairer than leaving this to the people of Australia?
I call the member for Petrie.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker.
Members on my left will cease interjecting. Member for Jagger again. Member for Petrie.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment. Will the Minister please update the House on the savings delivered to households and businesses in my electorate of Petrie from the repeal of the carbon tax, and are there any threats to these savings? Thank you.
I haven't called the Minister for the Environment. Yes, I haven't called. If the Minister could resume his seat, I haven't called you yet. The member for Hotham on a point of order.
Speaker, I refer to page 555 of the practice. It's very clearly stated in the practice, and I'll quote, "It is not in order for ministers to be questioned on opposition policies for which they are not responsible." Speaker, I'd ask you to rule the latter part of that question out of order.
The member will resume her seat. This came up yesterday. The member for Herbert will cease interjecting, particularly on me, if that's okay. This came up yesterday. I'm going to address this matter without interjection, and we're not going to revisit it each question. The member for Hotham raised a point of order similar to some points of order being raised yesterday. There's 2 points for members opposite to consider. The question did not specifically ask if I could speak without being interrupted. The question did not ask about opposition policies, it asked about alternatives. And as I said yesterday, Speaker Jenkins in February 2008, indicated he did not like that practice. He did indicate that. But when he indicated, he did acknowledge that that traditionally was the practice, to ask for alternatives or any threats to a particular policy. He indicated that. The reference in practice is footnoted, and it refers specifically to Speaker Jenkins. Indeed, if you go back and look at Hansard, you'll find numerous examples of questions that were in order that ask whether there are any alternatives